Hi everyone, it's lovely to be here, and I'd like to introduce you to Chloé Hayden, who's been kind enough to let us interview her today. Many of you will know Chloé as Quinny on Heartbreak High, and I know I've got two members of my team who absolutely love the programme and find you to be a real inspiration. So they were really excited that I was speaking to you today. Yeah, the reason we're also speaking to Chloé is because Chloé's got a new book here. Okay, different, not less, which they've been kind enough to send me over so that I could read it first. I love the book, Chloé. I love the book because you talk about neurodivergence in the same way that we do, very much about, because we don't need fixing, and we just need things to be accessible for us, and then we're absolutely fine and can thrive. The other bit I loved about it was that I was able to dip in and out of it, which from my ADHD personally is a huge bonus, really. So I think I've read all of it, but just not as from start to finish. It's all sort of dipping out. Look, got loads of post-it notes in it of things that really sort of shouted out to me. But I think being able to write a book in that way for our community is actually really quite important. None of us are great at starting at the beginning and going all the way through. So I love that.
I'm glad to hear.
We've got some questions that have come from our community here. We've got a very big community, about 200,000 that we connect with online, and also the people that we support and work with within the organisation. And we've sort of brought them together, if you know what I mean. So you haven't got all 70 of them that came through. We're not going to get them all done in half an hour. But I've just got a couple of questions of my own, if we can start with that first. So I'd like to ask you where the need for telling your story came from, and what you hope to achieve with the book.
I guess the biggest thing came from the fact that when I got my autism diagnosis, there was nothing out there. The only things that there was things that were written by these so-called professionals, and that were making my mind out to be dark and wrong and scary. And as a 13-year-old girl, as anyone, that's terrifying to hear. So sharing my story came from the fact that there was no one else that was sharing theirs, that our voices had been hidden and silenced and told that they weren't necessary for so long, and it caused me so much grief and so much anxiety and so much pain. So sharing my story initially came from a desperation of trying to find others.
Yes, I agree. I think one of our big things as an organisation was to get rid of all of the clinical language in the way that we talk. Because at that point of diagnosis, it doesn't matter whether you're a young person or a parent, you're suddenly faced with this literature and you don't know what the hell it means, and you're already scared and worried, and it just adds another thing onto the top. So being able to just get rid of that for us was important, and you've obviously done that in droves in the way that you've written, and I think that's what makes it so relatable and very important. One thing I love about social media, and I know you're passionate about being on there too, is I think in our particular community, it's brought us together and enabled everybody to feel that message very strongly, that this isn't about clinical rhetoric necessarily. The clinical stuff's important, but on a day-to-day basis, we've all got real lives with real hiccups and problems that we need just real information from people that have been there, done that, and are also on that journey as well, that we can just access really easily, which is why I think the book is such a huge success, as well as how that comes from that.
Thank you.
The other thing I just want to ask you is, how were you able to keep on track when you were writing? Because I know we've got a lot of our community go, well, how did she do that? I wouldn't be able to just sit there and concentrate and do.
Look, it was definitely a team effort. First of all, we came up with a game plan when I started writing the book. My publishing team and I kind of made a bit of a checklist, a bit of a, here's what each chapter is going to be, here's what we need to cover in these chapters, go. So kind of having those puzzle pieces made it a lot easier to actually find the puzzle, especially because a lot of the stories that I share, I've already shared. So it was really just kind of figuring out how to kind of weave that into an entire book rather than just, you know, singular blog posts and YouTube videos and stuff like that. I also have an incredibly supportive family, and also a fiance who is incredibly good at keeping time and keeping track of things. So he made me an Excel spreadsheet and kind of helped me to, because I have time blindness. I can't see time. So he was like, here's how time passes and here's how we need to do it in order to get this out. So I had an incredible supportive network within every aspect of the journey.
Yeah, I think that side of it's important. Having people around you that just get it, and can sense when you're having a bad day, and actually we just need to give them some space today, or now is a day when we can push forward a little bit harder. That's why we often get children referred to us as a case, which is a dreadful way of terming it, and it really annoys me. But it's always saying, can you sort this child out? And it's like, no, we're not. One, they don't need sorting out. That isn't what the problem is at all. But it's also working with everybody that's around that child, not just leaving them in isolation. So yeah, I like the spreadsheet idea as well. I know what you mean about the time blindness. I'm absolutely there. I'll overcommit my hour to something that would probably take all day without even batting an eyelid. So I know where you are with that enormously. Okay, so this is a question that one of the questions that came in from the community, and it starts with, hello Chloe, when you were a child, what was the one main thing that adults around you did or didn't do that made your life harder? And if there were multiple things, please share.
I think the biggest thing, and this is probably mostly so for teachers and the schooling system as a whole, seeing me as a child that I'm not and will never be, and trying to force me into being that child. And I don't think you need to have a diagnosis to be treated the way that your mind needs to be. It was very, very clearly obvious from a very, very young age that I wasn't like other kids. And instead of my teachers and grown-ups in my life saying, oh, okay, now we know that she's not the same as everyone else, let's learn and help teach her in ways that works with her. It was instead, okay, well, let's force her to conform and make sure it happens. And a child that is different, a child that is not supposed to conform, is never going to conform. They're just going to continuously hurt themselves trying. So I think the worst thing is probably came from the education system, and what that was is trying to make me something that I'm not, and not only will never be, but never should be.
No, and we're marginalizing us in that way means that the world as a whole is missing out on the skills and things that we have, as well as, you know, it causes huge trauma. The number of people that we've got in our school system who are struggling to such a degree that it's leading to long-term trauma and PTSD based symptoms. There's a lot of research that's showing that now, and it's so difficult as a parent as well to be told you've got to force your child into an environment that you know is causing them so much distress, and you can clearly see it, and yet it's like, well, they've got to go to school, they've got to go to school. And it's like, there's lots of different ways we can do school, and I think a lot of our families certainly here are finding that out, that we don't have to put them through this every day. There's a different way, and that doesn't take the school system off the hook. There's a lot of work they've got to do to make those changes, but it's got to come. There's too many of us now for them to just ignore us and pretend we're not here. Too many of us speaking out as well about the fact that it's not okay, and the power will always come from the bottom up. So I'm really excited about that. She's also said she knows that she learns by making mistakes, but for her daughter, she wants to know as much as possible how to help her now and not to make her life harder. She's now 7 and was diagnosed when she was 3. So, I mean, from her, looking at it through her eyes, what do you think she can do not to make it harder for her?
Honestly, exactly what I just said. I think the biggest thing that my parents did for me, and the biggest thing that I tell all parents to do for their kids, is to look at their cans instead of their can'ts. Look at the positives, look at what they're good at, look at the things that make them tick, that make them excited, that make them sparkle, the things that she can't do or that she struggles with. It doesn't matter. The things that your child can do. And as a child, your parents, particularly your mum in most cases, is the most important person in your life. If your mum speaks badly about yourself, about herself, you're going to learn to speak badly about yourself too. If your mum looks down on you, you're going to look down on yourself. As a parent, as a carer of a child, as a grown-up in a child's life, if they see you loving and appreciating and valuing them for all that they are, that's going to have a flow-on effect, and they're going to start doing the same.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important. We see so many parents who really just need permission to do that because the system is telling them that everything their child is doing wrong. And looking at that as a baseline of the way that we support and talk to families, that would be a primary thing that's important to me, where they reach that point of seeing that everything that autism and ADHD brings to their family rather than the things that it takes away. So yeah, thank you for that. I'm sure that mum will be very, very pleased with your response. Right, next question. How have you coped with disclosing your diagnosis? Some people advise not to do so for fear of being judged or losing work, etc. And this person wondered what your stance was on that.
Here's the thing. We label things. Humans label things. It's just what we do. And at the moment, these people's label, particularly those that are worried about being judged in their friend groups or their workplace or their education system, they currently already have label. People have already labeled them, except currently that label is weird. They don't fit in. They're strange. They're different. Why aren't they like me? That label already exists. Turning that label instead to, oh, they're autistic, then actually gives us the opportunity for, first of all, us to teach them, second of them, for them to actually learn and go, okay, this is a different brain, this is a different mindset, where the label is there already. We're simply now putting that label into something that we can actually make sense of. That's the first and foremost thing. Telling someone, unless you are in a genuinely dangerous situation, telling someone that you're neurodivergent is never a bad thing. In fact, I always say do it as soon as you possibly can, because if someone is going to judge you poorly for being neurodivergent, you do not want that person in your life. Which kind of adds on to the second thing of, I don't fear telling anyone that I'm autistic or disabled now, because if they do react poorly to it, good, because maybe I've gotten rid of another asshole that I don't want around me.
No, I quite agree. We say that as well around the employment agenda. If you disclose and they don't want you because of that, then you shouldn't be working for them in the first place. Do you know what
Absolutely.
I mean? That's not where you need to be. And showing young children and young people especially that they need that confidence to disclose and be able to share. So they attract the right people towards them who appreciate them for who they are, not who they think they have to be. Great. So next one. As a preschool child, are you aware of what the signs were that you had autism, and were they picked up upon or brushed off as something else?
When I was a kid, I knew that I was different. Like, I knew from day dot that I wasn't the same as everyone else. I didn't know what that label was, and neither did my parents. And neither did anyone in my life. I come from a very well-educated family. My grandpa is a doctor. My nan was a nurse. My mom studied psychology. Like, I come from a very well-educated family that, usually knows this sort of stuff. And they were all just like, oh, Chloe's just quirky. And that label kind of just stayed as quirky until I was 13 and got my diagnosis. I had always known that I was different, but that label was never, I guess, labeled. It was always just, oh, she's just quirky. And it's because of our misunderstanding of what autism is. They were like, we know the word, but we know that our understanding of the word isn't what Chloe is.
No, I know. I think it's really hard. We're doing a lot of work around early years at the moment to get environments and look at the way that the whole thing about how you should parent your child, that rhetoric around that needs to change. And that when they're going into like a nursery or preschool, to assume that every child is potentially a neurodivergent child and create your environment based on that, just so that we're not experiencing that trauma at such a young age of being in the wrong place or out of place. Or I very much had that sense of being on the edge of everything. I never felt that I was in the middle of it. And My daughter uses the expression that relationships are like jam donuts. There's this big sticky mess in the middle that we feel we have to be in all of the time. But every time we go in, it gets stickier and stickier. And we need to learn that we can be ourselves around the outside and look after ourselves and our mental health so much better when we're with the right people. So, yeah, I'd agree with that entirely. Okay, how do you deal with anxiety that can come as part of being neurodivergent?
Whew.
A biggie, I
I
know.
yeah, honestly, first of all, the biggest thing is therapy. I have to see a therapist every week. I also see therapy. I have a good support network around me. And I also know that it's okay to have those support networks. I'm an autistic person living in a very, very non-autistic world. Expecting me to be able to function highly all the time is ridiculous because that's not the way that it's like I can't do that. I think as well, getting a better understanding of neurodiversity and a better unlearning my inner ableism and learning that it is okay to exist as a neurodivergent person and taking away those expectations that I've got of myself, whether that be expectations that I've made up myself or expectations that capitalism has made up for me or expectations that society and neurotypical society has made up for me. Taking those expectations away and realizing that I do have worth and value and I'm allowed to take up space as a disabled person has definitely helped with a lot of that because it's taken those worries and those anxieties of am I enough and am I okay existing as I am.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of that, of not apologizing for being anxious, not apologizing for who you are, and sort of really feeling, giving people that strength to just be them is such a major part of that. And
Mhm.
giving them the tools to be able to say what it is they're worried about and what is really a big part of what we do. Making we talk about the only tools you need really are pen and paper, being able to make those thoughts so that you can see them, not trying to hold them in our brains, and it just allows you to process. It's not that we can't do things, it's just that you've got to give us the right tools to be able to do them in the first place. So yeah, it's something that we're really passionate about, to be fair. One last thing that I do just want to ask you, it's one of your quotes in your book, and it really struck me, and I just wondered if you could just talk about it. So it's the quote that says, "Every single one of us has the ability to be someone's sidekick, not in spite of our own differences, but because them." And I just wondered what you meant by that.
Humans, like every single thing in the universe, need others in order to exist, in order to survive. And I think we've really kind of come up with the idea that it's okay to be alone and that we are strong if we're by ourselves and that it's brave to do things by yourself and it's weak to ask for help and stuff like that. But like waves don't happen without the moon and flowers don't grow without fertilizer, sun. Like the most beautiful things in the entire world need help in order to exist. So the fact that we think that we are any different is absolutely ridiculous. Um, all of us existing and all of us thriving and finding our happily ever after is a group effort. We need every single person to be involved. That's how society is supposed to be. We're all supposed to help each other. It's supposed to be like a tribe. And I think it's really important that we understand that because of our differences, we don't have to be the hero of the story. We don't have to be the big burly warrior. We can create change and we can create good, positive, powerful change because of what we've got. Every single one of us are different. And it's really, really important to understand that what our differences are is important rather than a hindrance.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that autism has helped us understand people, not the other way around. Um, it's opening that debate about who we really are as a human race and experiencing that difference and where all of that comes from, and that the world needs all of us, not just a small group of us. And I think we're slowly chipping away at that, which is really encouraging from where I sit. Because I've been doing this for sort of over 30 years and it was pretty awful when we started. And everyone goes, it's still really bad. And it is, but in a different way to what it used to be. At least we're talking, and people like you are using your platform to be able to share that positive message. And I just think that's really encouraging, and we've got to keep doing that, because if not, it will just stay static as to where we are. Chloé, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. We're going to promote your book on World Book Day, and because I think it's really important to share what your message is and the way that you talk about it, and just keeping it real. So I'm really, really grateful that you were able to spend the time with us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.